there's a sefer that comes out periodically, which is called Kerem Chabad. And every time they take a different topic and they discuss it and bring different things from different Sfarim. One of the recent ones has about the Rambam, and it brings very, very interesting stories about the Rambam. And since we are going now very soon to make another completion of the learning of the Rambam, as I'm sure you know that over 30 years ago, in 1984, in Tafshim Mem Daled, the Rebbe started the Takana. He instituted that everyone should learn Rambam, Maimonides, all of the Rambam, as we will discuss soon, this whole Takana. So therefore, I'd like to start off with a few of the very interesting stories that they have here regarding the learning of the Rambam. One of them, and they bring, of course, all the sources for the stories. One of them has a few versions to it, so I'm just going to sort of mix the two versions, but the end is the same in all the versions. And that is regarding the holy Rebbe Elimelech of Lizensk. Everywhere heard of Rebbe Elimelech, Reb Zusha's brother. And the stories go basically that Rebbe Elimelech was very poor, and the Rambam, who was in the yeshiva Shalmaila up in heaven, it heard him that the Rebbe Elimelech wasn't learning Rambam as much as he should. That his learning is so holy and so high, and he would be very good if he would learn Rambam even more. And another version has it that Rebbe Elimelech was very ill, and the Rambam came to him, and he told him, look, I'm also a doctor, but I would be able to heal you if you'd learn some more Rambam. And Rebbe Elimelech told the Rambam, in both versions of the story, I wish I could, but unfortunately I'm very poor and I don't have the Sfarim of the Rambam. I just don't have the books. What do I do? So the Rambam said, if I will bring you the books, will you learn it? And Rebbe Elimelech said, of course I'm going to learn these Sfarim as much as possible. And the Rambam brought to Rebbe Elimelech a whole set of Rambams. And the Koidenover, he said that he saw that set of Rambam that was on Rebbe Elimelech's desk. So we see here that unbelievably how the Rambam himself, Milamayla, he always wanted this. He also tried in his best way how the tzaddikim in this world should also learn Rambam. Then they bring down over here from the Hanhagis, from the Minhagim of the Chsam Sofer, from the customs of the Chsam Sofer, that every Motzei Shabbos the Chsam Sofer would learn Rambam ala Seder, in the order of the Rambam, as we will discuss soon what this order of the Rambam is. And there's something very unique about the Sefer HaRambam, which is different than all other Sfarim in the world. What the Rambam did, which no one else has, is that he, as he writes in his Akdama, in his introduction to his Sefer, in his preface, that the whole Torah Shebal Peh, the whole oral Torah, should be included in one Sefer. In other words, he's basically saying, there's the Torah of Moshe Rabbeinu, which is Torah Shebiksav, the 5 Chamisha Chumshe Torah. And then there's Torah Shebal Peh. And the Torah Shebal Peh is a lot of work to be able to go through the whole thing. You have the whole Gemara, the Talmud Bavli, Yerushalmi, and the Sifra, and the Sifri, and you have so many Medrash Rabbis, Zohar, you have so much to learn in order to know the Torah Shebal Peh. There says the Rambam that he wrote a Sefer that is Bekabetz le Torah Shebal Peh Kula. It has the whole Torah Shebal Peh, and you read the Chamisha Chumshe Torah, and then you read my Sefer, and you're all set. And of course, there were many that questioned the Rambam on how he could say such a controversial and radical statement, which that, Mir Hashem, we will discuss in other shiurim. But that is the unique part of the Rambam. And not only that, he wrote this Sefer, he wrote very clearly, that he wrote it la koton vela godol, that this should be understood to younger people, older people, whether it's in age or in knowledge, but everybody should be able to learn the whole Torah Shebal Peh. Now, for some reason, this concept of learning the whole Rambam is something that was not spread out throughout the whole world. For some reason, it didn't pick up. And as a matter of fact, here in the Kerem Chabad, he does bring from certain communities that had a special shir, a kviyas, different places in Eretz Yisrael, in other places in the world, where they would gather every day or once a week or whatever it is to learn through the Rambam. But unfortunately, it didn't pick up all over the world properly. Till finally, in 1984, in Tafshim Mem Daled, the Rebbe came out with this Takana. He instituted this concept that everyone should learn the whole Rambam. And the question is, why, how, what exactly did the Rebbe say? Why was this Takana instituted then, etc.? So this is what we are going to be doing today. We will discuss exactly what happened over here with this Takana. And there's a very interesting difference between the Rambam and any other Sefer. Take, for example, the Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch is the code of Jewish law. The code of Jewish law discusses all the laws, seemingly, that a Jew should have to do. The answer is no. The Shulchan Aruch does not have all the laws. It has all the laws that a person needs. But, for example, the halachas of Beis HaMikdash, the halachas of Karbonis, of the sacrifices, the halachas of Tumah V'Tar, the halachas of Tumas Tzaras, of leprosy, etc. All those halachas which don't happen today, for whatever reason, the Shulchan Aruch does not discuss. Those halachas you have in the Rambam. The Rambam has every single halacha that the Torah has, which means all the 630 mitzvahs, in their details, the Rambam has it all. It's almost the only sefer that has such a vast information about all the 630 mitzvahs. That is the unique part of the Rambam. So therefore, let's go through this Takana that the Rebbe started, that we should learn Rambam, and we're going to find out something phenomenal which has never yet happened in history, and we, Baruch Hashem, have part in this phenomenal idea. So this is all taken from the Likutei Sichos Chelik Chaf Zayin, the Likutei Sichos volume 27. This is on pages 229 and till 236, and of course in other places too, as we will quote soon. So go directly into your curriculum, and the question is, why did the Rebbe start this concept of learning Rambam? So you go to source number 1. This is a Gemara in Yuma. The Gemara in Yuma, Daf Tes Amud Beis. The Gemara says as follows. After the Gemara discusses why the first Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, because there was an issue about Torah, mitzvahs, etc., says the Gemara, Aval Mikdash Sheni. However, the second Beis HaMikdash, Sheho yu oiskim b'Torah b'mitzvahs u'b'gemilas chasadim, they did Torah, they did mitzvahs, and they did gemilas chasadim, acts of kindness. Mipnei ma charev. Why did it become destroyed? Answers the Gemara, Mipnei shehoyso boy sinas chinam, because there was sinas chinam, hatred amongst the people. So therefore, because there was hatred, we want to rebuild now the Beis HaMikdash. We want to have the third Beis HaMikdash. In order to do that, we have to do the opposite of sinas chinam, which is avas chinam, the concept of ahavas Yisrael, loving all the Yidden. So therefore, well, how do we make a unity amongst Yidden? If we're going to take the concept of Torah, the Alter Rebbe in Tanya, in the 5th chapter, he explains that the only unity possible in the world is when a person learns Torah. You have two objects, any two objects, and you press them together, they will be two separate things which are pressed with each other. But it's almost impossible to take two things and blend them together in such a way that they should be a unity. Even when you take, let's say you make a dough and you take flour and water and you mix it, etc. So now what you're going to have at the end is going to be two separate things, flour and water, how they are mixed, and now they make a third thing, which is called the dough. And in theory, you could take it to a lab and you can divide the two and see all the details. What is a true unity? Says the Alter Rebbe in Tanya, Torah. Why is Torah a true unity? Let's look in your source number 2, and we're going to see something unbelievable. The Alter Rebbe says in Tanya Perek Hey, in the 5th chapter, says the Alter Rebbe as follows. Hare, when a Yid learns Torah, when a Yid learns Torah and he understands with his intellect this psak, this concept in Torah, in halacha, b'mishnah or b'gemara or b'poskim, whether it's in the Mishnah, whether it's in the Gemara, in the Talmud, or in the poskim, in those who give out the rulings, then with his intellect, what does he understand? The seichel, the intellect of the Eibishter, of God. The less machshavat tfisa bei v'loy b'rtzonei v'chochmasei. A person cannot comprehend the knowledge of God. Still in all, what did God do? He brought himself down, his intellect, into the Torah. Now a Yid takes that Torah and he puts it into his brain, and this Torah and his intellect become one thing. Says the Alter Rebbe, "Vehu yichud nifla she'ein yichud kamoyo veloy ke'er kenimtza klal begashmias." There's no such other unity in the world that they should be so interconnected, unified with each other. Because when a person learns Torah and it goes into his intellect, so his intellect and the Torah become one thing which you cannot separate the two. So there is no other unity in the world besides for the unity of Torah with the intellect of a Yid. So therefore, if we want to get the proper achdus, the proper unity amongst Yidden, when all Yidden together learn the same concept in Torah, and it becomes unified with them, then we get another very important thing. Look at source number 3. The Zohar says, in Cheli Gimel, page Ein Gimel Amud Aleph, says the Zohar, Yisro miskashroam be'eraisa, be'eraisa be'kutsha bricha. That the Yidden are connected with the Torah and the Torah with the Eibishter. So it comes out over here that when the Torah and the Yidden, how do they connect it to Eibishter? Through Torah. When a Yid learns Torah, he becomes connected to the Eibishter. When a lot of Yidden learn Torah, the same thing, they become interconnected into an unbelievable unity. So now what we want to do is we want to get them all united together in Torah. Now, which part of Torah should we take? So the best thing to do is to take the whole Torah together, all the Yidden, learn the whole Torah. Then this way, all the Yidden are going to be united in an unbelievable fashion. And this is what we see in the Rambam, that the Rambam has the whole Torah. How do we see that the Rambam has the whole Torah? Look to your source number 4. What does the Rambam say in his Akdama, in his introduction? Says the Rambam that I wrote a sefer of halachas. This is rulings of Torah. Mekabetz leTorah shebal peh kula. This gathers all of the oral Torah, the whole of it, b'lashon brura v'derech tzara, in a very clear language and in a very short road. In other words, in a very simple way that everyone should be able to do that. Now let's analyze this for a moment. This concept of halachas and this concept of the Rambam Sefer. When we go through the levels of learning Torah, we have 4 different levels. So let's see what they are. Now, I basically picked in the Sikha those that the Rebbe brings from the Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch, because the Sikha is much, much longer. So I just brought down the points that will bring us to see the greatness of what the Sefer of the Rambam has accomplished for us. So let's go to source number 5. The first level of learning Torah is the straight one, and that is to learning the halachas that we need. When a person learns Pashat halacha, as we see, look in your source number 5. Hilchos Talmud Torah to the Alter Rebbe, Peirik Beis Halacha Tes, Siman Tes, says the Alter Rebbe as follows: Tzarich sheyihyeh kol limudoi. A person's main focus has to be, that his learning should be, belimud amevi lidei maaseh, a learning which brings him to action. What does that mean? Shehu halachas hatzrichas lechol adam. This is the halachas which are required for every person to know. Leida oison, to know them. Lekayim ha-mitzvahs kilchason. So this way he'll be able to fulfill the mitzvahs properly. That's what person Pashat has to know. Practical halacha. Velizoher. And this way he'll be careful. Milikoshel beisurim chas v'shalom. From chas v'shalom doing negative things. Vehem dvarim she'i efshar lishoyel tamid lechacham hameire shebeir oishelayiyeh de'alisha. That not everything can you run to the Rav for every single little detail, and not always there's a Rav available, etc. So the halachas hatzrichas, the simple laws, the pashut practical laws, those every person must know. That is the first level. Then there's a second level in Limud HaTorah. Go to your source number 6. In Hilchos Talmud Torah, the Alter Rebbe in Peirik Beis, in Siman Sif Yud, and also in another few places, that not only the regular halachas, but also leida kol ha-Torah shebiksav, to know the whole of written Torah, v'shebal peh kula, and the whole of the oral Torah, which this includes Talmud Bavli, Yerushalmi, Mechilta, Sifra, Sifri, Toseftes, Medrashim of Tanoim V'Amiroim. These are all Sfarim which were all written in the time of the Gemara by different people. Rashbi, etc., they wrote all these Sfarim on different Chumashim. Shekol Divreihem, they're all their words, including all the Medrashim. Hem Teira Shebal Peh, Shenitno Le Moshe Misinai. These were all given by Moshe Rabbeinu in Sinai. We have another whole shir explaining how is it possible that Moshe Rabbeinu gave the whole Torah Shebal Peh in Sinai. That's another subject, but the bottom line, the Alter Rebbe makes it very clear here that all these Talmud Bavli, Yerushalmi, etc., that we just said before, were all given from Moshe Rabbeinu in Sinai. And therefore, what is that second level in learning Torah? That a person should try to finish all of this Torah Shebal Peh at least Pam Achas Bechayav, at least one time in his life. Lekayim, to fulfill mitzvahs shomer tishmeru neskol ha-mitzvah, to be fulfilled the mitzvah that it says in the pasuk in the Torah that you should observe the whole mitzvah, and as the Rambam explained at the beginning in his Akdama, that mitzvah over here in this pasuk means Torah Shebal Peh, and then the Alter Rebbe adds Heim beremozim udrashes v'soides, even in the level of drush, sod, and remes, which is higher levels in Torah like Zohar and Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, etc. So the first level was just plain halacha. Second level is learning the whole of Torah Shebal Peh, the whole oral Torah. Then we have a third level, and that is, look in your source number 7. Hilchas Talmud Torah Lat Murazaken in Peirik Beis Sif Yud Aleph, says the Alter Rebbe as follows. Azai, when a person has a little bit more time, Chayav lehoisif me'at, a person has to add a little, slowly but surely. Lilmed b'shah zu halaches acheres shehem perush hataryag mitzvahs, that he should learn some more halachas of the which they are an explanation to all of the Taryag mitzvahs, all the 630 mitzvahs. Af mitzvahs she'eino noihagos, even mitzvahs which we don't do today. For example, says the Alter Rebbe, like the halachas of karbonis and the like. Because today we don't bring karbonis, so therefore, says the Alter Rebbe, still in all, we should learn also those halachas. V'lachein, says the Alter Rebbe, and therefore, af she'ein shazu maspekes, although this is not enough time. Lilmed halachis elu mehat Talmud v'lachzer alei, and he doesn't have enough time to learn all the halachas from the karbonis. From the Gemara, says the Alter Rebbe, Yilmod oisa miteicha mishnayis in pirusheihen. He should at least learn it from the Mishnah, with the pirushim, with the pshat, because the Mishnah is much shorter than the Gemara. Ve'alkein, and therefore, Nachain hadavar, it is correct, it is proper. Im efshar lilmed halachas kol karbonis b'shleimus, that he should learn all the halachas that have to do with the karbonis, with the sacrifices. Bechol ha'avodas shebemikdash, and all the service they did in the Beis Hamikdash. Behilches Hamikdash vechol keilav, and the halachas of the Beis Hamikdash and all its vessels and furniture. Ba'er kimevuer ba'er heitev, as it explained beautifully. Where? Bechibur ha'Rambam zal, in the Sefer of the Rambam, Besefer Avodah v'Karbonis. The Rambam wrote 14 Sfarim, and Sefer number 8 is Sefer Avodah, which discusses the worship in the Beis Hamikdash, and the 9th one discusses Karbonis, the sacrifices. And then, V'acharkach, and afterwards, Lilmed v'lachzer karoi beseder taharis v'zroim. And then later he should take the Seder in Mishnayos of Taharis, which is the purity and impure, and Zroim, and the first one which discusses all the halachas of the fields, etc., which has to do with Eretz Yisrael, etc., etc. So we see here another level of even learning halachas which are not practical in our times. That's the third level. The fourth level, says the Rambam, look in your source number 8, this is already not the Rambam, this is the Alter Rebbe in Likutei Torah, in his famous Likutei Torah where he has his Maimorim. In Parsha Kedoshim on page Lamed, the 4th column, there's a beautiful short Maimon, a discourse from the Alter Rebbe, which is called V'hadarta Pnei Zaken. It's on the famous pasuk where the Torah says in Parsha Kedoshim, V'hadarta Pnei Zaken, you should give honor to someone who is older. In other words, even just age makes a person that others have to respect him. And of course the Gemara says, Ezu Zakin Zeshekana Chachma, who is an older person, someone who has acquired knowledge. Says the Alter Rebbe in that Maimer, Lezois, and therefore, Kol Ish Nilvav, every single person who is active, Asher Yidvenu Libay, Vekolso Nafshay, Ledovko Beizborach Bitmidus, a person who wants to be connected to the Eibishter constantly, and that the Eibishter should rest in this person forever, constantly, without even a moment of interruption. How do we get that the Eibishter should be part of a person constantly? Says the Alter Rebbe, he should sit and memorize things for his memory of Torah. And she'az, then what happens, when someone memorizes Torah, even when he's in the middle of doing mundane things, physical things, which are not learning Torah, the Torah is hidden in him, and it's burning inside. And therefore the Alter Rebbe says that the minimum that he should do is what he should try at least, he should try to engrave in his brain, in his memory, the five books of Moshe Rabbeinu, that they are the shayresh, the source of the whole of written Torah and the oral Torah. And then says the Alter Rebbe, and in Torah shebal peh, and in the oral Torah, which part should he try to memorize? Al kopanim lepoches yakne veyachkek seder kochim. He should try to engrave in his brain at least the order of kochim, the order of karbonis in Mishnayos. So therefore, we see that there's a concept of engraving in the brain. And then the Alter Rebbe continues, looking at source number 9. And now we could understand the reason what it says in the Hilchos Talmud Torah in the name of the Sifri, that it's a mitzvah for a person to know the whole of Torah, which is what? Which this is the whole of the 630 mitzvahs and its details. So we see here that we had 4 levels. What was the third level that we said in number 7? That by learning the Rambam, you get Kol HaTorah Kula, because the Rambam also discusses the Seder of Kodshim, etc., of the Karbonis. And we're going to see something very interesting. If you look in source number 10, comes the Oir Tzadikim, actually, which the Alter Rebbe quotes him in Hilchos Talmud Torah, in the laws of Talmud Torah. Tzadikim was written by Reb Meir Papirash. He was a Talmid of the Arizal. The Arizal had a Talmid, Reb Chaim Vital. Reb Chaim Vital had a Talmid Tzemach, and Reb Meir was a Talmid of Tzemach. And he wrote a Perush which is called Tzadikim, where he discusses the concept of Gilgulim, etc. And he says over there something phenomenal, which this is the punchline to our concept here of today, where we're learning Rambam. Look at your number 10, Tzadikim. Says as follows in Simach of Beis Sif Yutes, Tzorich Adam lehashlim taryag mitzvahs. A person must complete all the 630 mitzvahs, b'maise, dibur u'machshava, in action, in speech, and in machshava, in intellect, in the thought. Therefore, what does he say? What should you do? Says Reb Meir Papirash. Velochein yesh lilmed yad hagdoila leharambam. Therefore, a person should learn the Rambam, because in the Rambam you have Kol HaTorah Kula, and this way you have accomplished the concept of learning all the 613 mitzvahs. And that is why, as we said before, there were certain places where they actually did that they learned all the Rambam, all of it. But unfortunately, this was not spread all over the place. Now, the Rambam has 14 Sfarim. That's what it's called Yad HaChazaka, his Sefer. Yad, Yud Dalid is 14, Yad is 10, Dalid is 4, so it's 14. So that's why the Rambam Sefer is called Yad HaChazaka. It's divided into 14 Sfarim. These 14 Sfarim have a total of 83 sections, 83 halachas. Each one of these 14 has a little less than 10 subjects in it, so we have a total of 83. And the 83 have a total of 1,000 chapters, which means that the whole Rambam is 1,000 chapters. Now we're soon going to see why do we have to know how many chapters there are in the Rambam. But there's a question that many people ask, and this is what the Rebbe explained then when he started this concept of learning Rambam. We have a minhag, we have a custom on Yud Tes Kislev that we take the Shas and we make a chalukas Shas. We divide up the Shas. Every person learns one Masechta or two Masechtas, whatever they could take for the year, and they learn it from Yud Tes Kislev until Yud Tes Kislev. And then, at the end of the year, by Yud Tes Kislev, through the fact that everyone together learned the whole Shas, it's as if everybody learned the whole Shas. So, if it works for the Shas, why don't we do this for the Rambam also? Everyone will take a different Sefer, and they will learn it throughout the year. And at the end of the year, because everyone takes a different Sefer, and between everybody, everything was learned, so it's all done. So why don't we do with the Rambam the same thing that we do with the Shas? Explained to the Rebbe as follows. Look at your source number 11. Source number 11 is from the Sefer called Yad Malachi. Yad Malachi is a Sefer that writes the klolim, the general rules, how you learn certain Sfarim, how you learn the Shulchan Aruch, how you learn the Rambam. Every Sefer has its klolim, its general rules. A very interesting klal about the Rambam is as follows. Look in number 11. Says the Yad Malachi in Klole HaRambam S'if Vav, in the general rules, how you learn the Rambam, says as follows. The Rambam many times will write a certain halacha, and he won't write everything about it. Why? Because he already wrote previously the concept. To say though that the Rambam doesn't write something now because you realize that later he will explain it, no, that doesn't happen. Which means that in order to know, to understand the halacha in the Rambam, let's say in the 6th volume, you have to have learned all the volumes before. Why? Because the Rambam doesn't repeat himself. So let's say the Rambam gave a ruling before, let's say, that pikuach nefesh doiche kol ha-Torah, that a case of pikuach nefesh, that rules over anything else in Torah. Let's say he wrote it before in somewhere, so he's not going to bring it later in other places, although the Gemara, when they talk about that subject, they say, well, but if it's a case of pikuach nefesh, then you don't have to do that mitzvah. The Rambam won't bring it again because he relied before. And there are many, many things that we see in the different Sfarim, that they ask questions on the Rambam. Why doesn't the Rambam say a certain thing? And had they read the Rambam from the beginning, they wouldn't ask this question. So therefore, the Rambam has to be learned from the beginning straight. You can't just learn a certain section in the Rambam. You have to learn all of it. Let's continue. Source number 12. There's Klale HaRambam. In the beginning of the Rambam, there's also rules how you learn the Rambam. And they say over there approximately the same language as the Yad Malachi. What does it say? Derech HaRambam listem b'mokem echad dvorav. The Rambam sometimes will write something in a halacha, and he may not bring all the details. And he will rely on what he wrote elsewhere. Mihu, however, he will rely on something that he already wrote before, not to something that he wrote later. So here again we see that the Rambam, you have to learn it straight from the beginning, because if you learn only a certain section of it, you may be missing a lot of information. And the Rebbe adds even more. This is a very important point, and this is something which is not done in the yeshivas properly. Look in your source number 13. The Rebbe says over here in the Likutei Sichos, in the bottom of note number 22, Says the Rebbe, so according to this we can understand, according to this ruling, that the Rambam sometimes will rely on something that he wrote before, that it is not proper to start the learning from the Rambam. Many people, unfortunately, they don't start the Rambam from the beginning. They skip the first 4 chapters, because the first 4 chapters in the halachas of Yisro Torah, in the halachas of the foundations of Torah, it discusses lofty things, Avas Hashem, Yiras Hashem. It discusses the love for the Eibishter. It discusses things that have to do with the universe, the galaxy, and the stars, etc. And people are not used to learning this type of stuff, so they start lechatchila from the 5th chapter, which discusses the halachas of Kiddush Hashem. Oh, that's already something more practical, and that's many Sfarim of even big Goyim start from Perikei of the Rambam. Says the Rebbe that it doesn't make sense to do that, right? Or those that skip the first chapters. Why? Because this is the opposite. It's contrary to the ruling of the general klal, of the general rule, how you learn the Rambam, that the learning of the Rambam has to be in order. On many things the Rambam relied on what he learned, what he wrote before. For example, a lot of people learn the halachas of Kiddush HaChodesh, the halachas of Rosh Chodesh, and how astronomy and how you figure out when Rosh Chodesh is. And they start from Kiddush HaChodesh, and there's a lot of details missing. Little do they know that this is discussed in the beginning of the Rambam, in Hilchos Yesod Torah, in the first chapters. If they would learn those chapters where the Rambam gives the general rules, how the solar system works according to Torah, then once they get to Hilchos Kiddush HaChodesh, it's so much easier to learn it. Never mind the fact that many people are afraid to touch Kiddush HaChodesh because they think it's only for astronomers. No, the Rambam wrote very clear, this is Lakoten Velagodol. This is for even young children could learn the halachas of Kiddush HaChodesh. So we understand now what the greatness of the Sefer of the Rambam, that you have to learn the whole thing, and that's how we can't do it like Yutes Kislev, that we chop up the Shas and we give to each one a Masechta. Because in Shas you could do that. Why can you do that in Shas? Let's look at source number 14, because the Gemara says in Babekame, Daf Kuf Beis Amud Aleph, and also Taisos in the beginning of Masechta Baba Metzia, Bitrei Masechtes Ein Seder Le Mishnah. It is true, within one Masechta, you have to go through the whole Masechta, because sometimes you will have some things written later based on something that it says before. But if it's 2 separate Masechtas, then there is no Seder that one must follow the other. Although the Rambam does explain in Spirit HaMishnayos what is the sequence of events of why certain Masechtas were put in certain order. There is a certain order to the Shas, but you don't have to rely from one Masechta onto the other. So therefore, on Yutes Kislev, we can take the Shas and divide it up, but the Rambam, you cannot do that. You have to learn the whole Rambam, all al HaSeder. So now the question is, how should you learn the Rambam? The Rambam has 1,000 chapters. How long will it take to learn Rambam? Believe it or not, the Rebbe, when he started the Takana then in 1984, he said that it could be all done in 1 year. Why did the Rebbe want it then that it should be done in 1 year? The Rebbe started this Takana was around Pesach time, right after Pesach. So the Rebbe said he would like the Rambam to be finished within a year to the Rambam's birthday. The Rambam's birthday is on Erev Pesach, so there's only one way to do it. That if we learn 3 prakim every single day, 3 chapters a day, take 1,000 chapter, so, and you have about 360 days a year, so that's how you can have it in less than a year. If you do 3 chapters a day, we will be able to make a siyum by Erev Pesach, which is the Rambam's birthday. So let's give a look in the right. So that's that's if you do it in 1 year. Those who cannot finish to learn 3 prakim a day, because that's a little too much, says the Rebbe, for them there is another way how we could do this. Instead of doing 3 prakim a day, they're going to do 1 perik a day. If they do 1 perik a day, we'll finish in 3 years' time, and we're going to finish it around Shvat time, around that time. So we have 2 options. Either we're going to do 3 chapters a day and finish the whole Rambam within a year, or do 1 chapter a day and finish in 3 years. What? Yeah. Don't worry, there's another way. For those who cannot even do one chapter a day, there's also a for them, how they also could learn the whole Rambam. So we're going to get to it. 1 minute. So what do we see here? That we have two options. Either 3 chapters a day and finish in a little less than a year, or do 1 chapter a day and finish in 3 years. So someone's going to say, where do we find this business of 1 year, 3 years? The Rambam. We're talking about the Rambam. We have it in the Rambam. Where does the Rambam say it? Look at your source number 15. The Rambam says in Ilchas Tefillah, in the laws of davening, Peirik Yud Gimel Halacha Aleph, says the Rambam as follows. HaMinhag HaPashut Bechol Yisrael. What is the prevalent custom by all Yidden? Shemashlimin es HaTorah b'shana achas. That you finish the whole Torah in 1 year. In other words, you start the Torah on Simchas Torah, and you finish it on Simchas Torah. That's in every shul in the world. Let's look in the Rambam. Maschilim b'Shabbos shachar Chag HaSukkos. The first Shabbos after Sukkos, we read what? V'koirim b'Seder Bereshis. We read Parsha Bereshis, the first Shabbos after Sukkos. Bashniya Eile Tolos. In the second Shabbos, we read Noach, and so on, all the Shabbosim. Ad shegoymerin es HaTorah b'Chag HaSukkos. Until we finish the Torah when? On Sukkos, on Simchas Torah. So, in a year, you finish the Torah in 1 year. However, says the Rambam, yes, there are also mi shemashlim es HaTorah b'shalosh shanim. There are those that also finish the Torah in 3 years. The Rambam says ve'ein ze minhag pashut. This is not a regular minhag, but a regular custom. But at least we see that there are 2 options. You have the option of learning the whole Torah in 1 year, and you have the option of doing it in 3 years. So too, when we're going to learn Mishnah Torah of the Rambam, so for that also we have 2 options. We're going to do it in 1 year, where you learn 3 chapters a day, or we're going to learn in 3 years, where you do 1 chapter a day. Now there's another very important point when we're going to learn Rambam, about the Rambam. Look in your source number 16, that the preface, the introduction of the Rambam is different than all other Sfarim. All other Sfarim, when a person writes a Sefer, first he writes the whole Sefer, and when he's finished writing the whole Sefer from beginning to the end, so he knows exactly what he did over here, then he will write a Hakdama, an introduction of explaining what the Sefer is and why he wrote the Sefer and what he does in the Sefer, etc. So first comes the book, then comes the Hakdama, then comes the introduction. The Rambam worked the other way around. The Rambam first wrote a Hakdama, first he wrote an introduction. As you can see that in the introduction he writes, and later I will explain this, and later I will explain this. I will, in future sense. Everybody else writes an Hakdama, and therefore I explained this in the Sefer. The Rambam says, no, I will explain, which means that in his mind he already had the whole Sefer, how he's going to write it. Look at your source number 16. The Rambam says, for example, this is one example, in Ilchas Shchita, in Peirik Aleph Halacha Daled, says the Rambam, Kol hadvarim ha'elu al peh tziva bohen. All these things, the Eibishter commanded them in an oral fashion. Kishar Torah shebal peh shehi nikra mitzvah, like the rest of Torah shebal peh, of the oral Torah, which is called mitzvah. If you remember, we had it before in source number, that veha mitzvah means the Torah shebal peh. This is in source number 6, if you remember, when we're learning about the concept of learning the whole of Torah shebal peh, mitzvah. Says the Rambam in the source number 16, Kemoishe bi'arnu bitchilas chibur zeh, like we wrote in the beginning of this Sefer. The Rambam doesn't write as we wrote in the Hakdama of the Sefer, in the introduction, as I wrote in the beginning of the Sefer. Where is the beginning of the Sefer? In his Hakdama. So therefore, when we learned the Rambam, when we learned the 3 prakim a day, we started from the beginning, which is what's called the introduction of the Rambam. So at least now we understand. So why do we learn Rambam? Because we have to learn the whole Torah shebal peh, as the Alter Rebbe brought in Shulchan Aruch, and we want to learn all the 630 mitzvahs with all of its ramifications, and therefore we have 2 options. Either we could do it in 1 year by learning 3 chapters a day, or we could do it in 3 years by learning 1 chapter a day. So far so good? This is the Takana. So this way we have done all of the Torah shebal peh, as the Rambam makes it very clear. Yeah, we will discuss that soon. Okay, yeah, I'll bring it up soon. Okay. Now the question is, what do we do with people who can't learn a Perek a day? They just never went to yeshiva and just they can't do it. What are they supposed to do? They want to be part of this. They also want to do the whole Torah Shebal Peh and halachas and be part of this Achdus Yisrael that the Rebbe is trying to do. Or children, or even women who are not used to this concept of learning a Perek Rambam a day, that they just never heard of something like this. That's not what they do. So the question is, what do we do for them? So for that, the Rambam has a solution for them too. The Rambam was the teacher of Klal Yisrael for all generations. So the Rambam has a solution for that too. The Rambam, besides for his Sefer Hayad, that he wrote of all of the halachas in 1,000 chapters, the Rambam also wrote a very short version of the 630 mitzvahs, and that is a sefer called Sefer HaMitzvahs. And in there, he has all the 630 mitzvahs, each mitzvah very, very short. While in his Sefer HaRambam, he could have sometimes 30 chapters on a certain subject. In the Sefer HaMitzvahs, it will be just 1 or 2 mitzvahs, and that's all it is. So therefore, what they could do is, the people who are not used to learning even a Perek a day, or women, children, whoever they are, and they all want to be part of this, and they should be part of it, they will do the Sefer HaMitzvahs, which is parallel to the 3 prakim that are learned every single day. For example, if they're learning now Hilchas Eidus, if they're learning the laws of testimony in the 3 prakim Rambam a day, whoever is learning Sefer HaMitzvahs will learn the mitzvah of Eidus, the mitzvah of testimony. So they're not going to learn the Sefer HaMitzvahs in the order of the Sefer HaMitzvahs, rather they learn the Sefer HaMitzvahs parallel to the 3 prakim Rambam that they're learning. And therefore there's a few additions of the Sefer HaMitzvahs of the Rambam that came out in this order, according to the parallel, to the correlation to the 3 prakim a day that are learned. And it's very interesting. The Rambam, he wrote the Sefer HaMitzvahs with this in mind, for the people who are not used to learning Perek Echad, for those people who unfortunately did not have a chance to go to yeshiva. And the Rambam wrote the Sefer HaMitzvahs in Arabic, because he wanted everyone to be able to have a shaykhus to Torah. Not only have a shaykhus, a connection to Torah, but they should be able to have a connection to the whole of Torah Shebal Peh, and this is why he wrote the Sefer HaMitzvahs. Let's look in source number 17. There's a beautiful letter from the Rambam to Reb Shmuel Even Tibun. It was a family of translators. His father, his son, Reb Moshe, Reb Shmuel, they were all translators. And the Rambam wrote to him, and in the letter he writes a whole arichis, that the Sefer HaMitzvahs was written Beloshen Amodabar. It was written in a language that the simple people can understand. And not only simple, it was written in Arabic, so everybody should be able to do that. So a lot of people have a question. We're not going to go through all the details of it, but at least one little note about it, that what kind of business is women learning Torah? So although the Rebbe was one of the biggest advocates on the concept of women learning Torah, I'm not going to go now through the whole arichas. There's a beautiful sikha from the Rebbe in Likutei Sichos Chelik Yud Daled. There was a whole yechidus that the Rebbe had with the Belzer Rebbe regarding this concept of women learning a lot, etc. But the Rebbe always quotes a Hilchas Talmud Torah of the Alter Rebbe, beautiful piece for those people who say the women should not learn, should learn this piece in the Alter Rebbe, and they will see. The Alter Rebbe says in Hilchas Talmud Torah, at the end of the first chapter, he says as follows, in Hilchas Talmud Torah, look in your source number 18. Umikol Makim, still in all, Gam Hanoshim Chayoves Lilmed Halachis Atzriches Lohen. Even women are chayev, they are must learn the halachis which they have to fulfill. Leida Eison, that they should know them well. For example, Kemoidine Nido Tvila, the laws that have to do with women. Umelicha, the laws that have to do in the kitchen with meat, kosher, non-kosher. The Isur Yichud, and of course the laws of being in, the men and women are not allowed to be in seclusion by themselves. There always has to be other people there. Chas v'shalom, for Isur Yichud. V'chol mitzvah she'ein azman grome. All the mitzvahs which are not connected to time, women also are chayiv in all those mitzvahs. So there, v'chol mitzvahs leisesa shel Torah, and all the mitzvahs leisesa in the Torah, all the negative mitzvahs, v'shel divrei seifrim, shehein muzharim bohen kanoshim. They are commanded to watch all those mitzvahs, to observe them just like men. So those halachas which are pertaining to women, they must learn all those halachas. Not only that, look what we have. Look at source number 19. The Alter Rebbe says in Shulchan Aruch, in Siman Yud Daled, in Siv Gimel, Says the Alter Rebbe, there's a whole question whether women could make a bracha on a mitzvah, even those though they're not mechuyev. Says the Alter Rebbe, lochein, therefore, yechoyles hein levarech al kol mitzvah sheim pturim mehen. The women are allowed to make a bracha on a mitzvah even if they're potter from that mitzvah. Im oisim a mitzvahs ketikunan be'inyan sha'anoshim mechoylim levarech alein. If they do the mitzvah correctly, in a way that also a man can make a bracha in that period. That is why we see that the women make a bracha on lulav or all kinds of other things. Why? Because the women are allowed to do, obviously, chas v'shalom, they shouldn't do on those was tarnished. But there is no question that the women have a chiyuv of limud atayra on all their halachas atzrichas lahen. And the Rebbe goes through a whole thing why they have to learn the Rambam, the whole of Rambam, because the Rambam has over there the halachas of avas Hashem and yiras Hashem, the love for the Eibishter, the fear for the Eibishter, and therefore they have to learn also all these halachas. So therefore the concept of learning Rambam is for everybody, no exception, men, women, children, regardless of their level. Someone who could do 3 prakim a day, great. Someone who cannot do 3 prakim a day, no problem, does 1 perik a day, and every 3 years he meets up together with the people who are doing 3 prakim a day. And someone who cannot do 1 perik a day, do sefer mitzvahs. If anybody does any of the 3, he is part of this Achdus Yisrael, this unbelievable unity of all the Yidden together all over the world, a unity through Torah. This is the reason why the Rebbe asked that we should learn Rambam. Now comes the $1 million question which you asked before, and that is, why now? What happened all of a sudden that the Rebbe came out with this Takana of learning Rambam? Why didn't this come out as soon as the Rambam came out? Why didn't this come out 500 years ago? What happened now all of a sudden? Okay, so let's go and see what the Alter Rebbe says in Shulchan Aruch. Let's look at number 20, your source number 20. Says the Alter Rebbe as follows. By the way, the Rebbe mentioned in that Sikha, then about when I was talking about the women, that for all those people who have a problem with the concept of the women learning Torah, let them just look at Parshas Yisro, where it says over there that the Rebbe gave the Torah to the Yidden. What did the Rebbe tell Moshe Rabbeinu? You should talk to Beis Yaakov, to the house of Yaakov, and then you should tell to the Yidden. Who is Beis Yaakov, says Rashi? Eile Hanoshim, goes the ladies. So first Moshe Rabbeinu had to speak to the ladies, and then he had to speak to the men. So we see that even the whole concept of giving of the Torah, the ladies came first. So therefore, yes, the ladies have to learn Torah, and a lot of Torah, obviously according to their possibilities, but there is no question that they are an integral part of the learning of the Rambam, especially as we will see now of why is attack in our generation. Says that, look in source number 20, says the Alter Rebbe, in Ilchos Talmud Torah, in Perik Aleph Halacha Daled, says the Alter Rebbe as follows. V'chein amru chachmei ha'emes, so say also the chachmei ha'emes, the chachamim, the sages of truth, and this, one of them is Takidis Reb Meir Papirash, that we brought before. In source number 10, in Sefer Eir Tzadikim, it says, they say as follows. Shekol nefesh misroel tzricha love begilgulim rabim. Every neshama of a yid has to come down in a gilgul, in another body, and another body, and another body. Until when? Ad shetekayim kol lataryag mitzvahs. Until it will fulfill all the 630 mitzvahs. B'maise dibur machshava. In action, in speech, and in thought. Says the Alter Rebbe, what is dibur machshava? What does it mean in speech and in thought? Who limed hilchasehen, they're learning the laws of all the 630 mitzvahs. Al derech she'amru chachamim, al pasuk zois teras achatos, just like the chachamim say on the pasuk, on the verse, zois teras achatos, these are the laws of the carbon chatos, of a sin offering. What are the laws? Says the Gemara, shekal ha'oisek b'teiras chatos ke'ilu v'chulu. Someone who learns the halachas of karbonis, it's as if he actually brought the karbonis. So therefore, even those mitzvahs that we cannot fulfill terei b'maaseh in action, but through that we learn the halachas of that specific mitzvah, it is as if we fulfilled that mitzvah. That's the first thing that they say. So therefore a person has to go through Gilgulim and Gilgulim until he learns all the 630 mitzvahs. Continues the Alter Rebbe, they said another thing, Shekol nefesh tzricha letikuno, and every neshama needs to be rectified properly. Lasek bepardes, that it has to learn pshat, remes, drush, and sod, the 4 levels of Torah, the simple level, until the esoteric, until all the secrets of Torah. As much as a person can comprehend, veleidan, to know, vechol mi sheyochel lahasig veleida harbe, and someone who could learn a lot, venisatzel, and he was lazy, veloi hisig, and he did not learn as much as he could, veyoda elo me'at, and he only learned a little bit. Says the Chachmei HaEmes, Tzarich Love Begilgul, his neshama will have to come down again into this world. Until he will learn everything that his neshama is capable of learning. Whether we're talking of pshat of the halachas, a simple explanation, in all 4 levels of Torah. If a person doesn't do it in this Gilgul, he will have to come again, a reincarnation, into another body and finish that. Why? Because everything that a person can learn and understand and comprehend of knowledge of Torah, zehu tikun shlemusa. This is its perfection of this neshama. And there's no way that he could be perfected, to be reconnected with its source where it came from, without the knowledge of all of this. That's what the Chachamim say, the sages said. Lucky is the one who comes here, arrives here to the final destination with his Talmud, with his learning in his hand, which means he has done it. So he shouldn't have to be reincarnated again. So we see here that if a neshama comes down to this world and it learned only about 600 mitzvahs, it'll have to come down again and again until it finishes all the 613 mitzvahs. Says the Rebbe in source number 22, this is a sikha that the Rebbe said in Tafshim Memches, this is like 2-3 years after the Rebbe said about the learning of the Rambam. Says the Rebbe, Benegei, look in source number 21, Benegei alechiyuv de kol echad vechad misrael, regarding this obligation that every single Jew has, Lil Meitol Kol HaTorah Kula, to learn the whole of Torah. Mevur Behilchos Talmud Torah. We just learned in Hilchos Talmud Torah. This is what the Rebbe is quoting. This source number 20 that we just did. Sheyach Li is Begilgul Zeh or Begilgul Acher. That it could be either in the Gilgul that a person is in, or his neshama will have to come down again Begilgul Acher in another reincarnation. Says the Rebbe, in our times, saves mana galus at the end of galus. We are now so close to the Geula Hamitis Vashlema, to the final redemption. We cannot rely that our neshama is going to come to another Gilgul. So therefore, there's only one Eitzah. Since Mashiach is coming any day, now it's a time bomb. It's a matter of minutes. We have to chaparein and learn Kol HaTorah Kula. How do you do that? The answer is the Rambam. By learning the Rambam, you have Kol HaTorah Kula. You have the whole Torah. So therefore, now we can understand what this Takana was. And that's why we're going to go over some of the questions that we said. So in other words, so why did the Rebbe ask that we do this Takana, this concept of learning Rambam every single day? Because we want to be able to finish the Rambam within a year. Just like the Torah is finished within a year, so we finish Mishnah Torah within a year. If those that cannot do the whole of Torah in 1 year, so they do it in 3 years, which is also a minig in Torah. It's not the prevalent, but it's also 100% okay. If you don't manage to do 3 prakim a day, you want to do 1, that's also enough. For those people who cannot do the Perik Echad a day, let him do Sefer HaMitzvahs. And by the way, today this is all available online. This is available on the telephone. All you have to do is just click in a few numbers, and you could hear a beautiful shiur, short and sweet and to the point, in the Sefer HaMitzvahs, or in Perik Echad, or in Shloisha Prakim. It's all on a silver platter. Therefore, It's like someone asked before, if the idea is to learn halachas every single day, why don't we just learn Shulchan Aruch? And the answer is, as we said, Shulchan Aruch does not have all the halachas. The Rambam is the one that has all the halachas. Now, why does everyone have to learn the whole Rambam? And we can't do a distribution. Everybody should learn a certain portion, just like we do with Shas on Yutes Kislev, because on Yutes Kislev we have this minhag. And the answer is, you could learn one Masechta at a time, but you cannot learn one book of the Rambam at a time, because the Rambam relies on something that he wrote before. So therefore, a person, in order to understand the Rambam, he has to learn the whole Rambam in the sequence of the whole Rambam. And also, it's not enough to learn the whole Rambam, we also have to learn the Hakdam of the Rambam, the preface of the Rambam. Why? The introduction, because the Rambam wrote that as the beginning of his Sefer, not only as an introduction. We learn also many halachas from the things that the Rambam wrote in his Hakdamah. So therefore we see how the concept of learning Rambam is so important. And therefore we do encourage everyone to please join a Siyum HaRambam. And by the way, something very interesting just to note, that after the Rebbe said that we should learn 3 Prakim Rambam, the next thing the Rebbe requested was that the yeshiva and the kollel in Lubavitch should make the Mare Mekaymes, the footnotes, the sources of where the Rambam wrote everything. Because there is a tshuva where the Rambam writes that he feels bad that he didn't write the sources where he took everything from. Obviously the Rambam had it all in his head, because it's a beautiful booklet that came out with the history of the Rambam. It's in Hebrew on one side and in English on the other, that it says the whole life story of the Rambam. He had a very, very tough life, and still he managed to write the Sefer HaRambam, which is amazing. But unfortunately he did not write the sources for everything, because sometimes when you go to the source you understand much better the concept. So a beautiful Sefer came out which is called the Mare Mekaymes. Mare Mekaymes le Sefer Mishnah Torah, and has all the sources for everything that the Rambam writes in his book, in his Mishnah Torah. And another beautiful thing came out only a few years ago, the whole 14 Sfarim of the Rambam, all in one volume. And on the bottom you have all the Mare Mekaymes of the Rambam, all the footnotes, the sources for the Rambam. Plus there's a beautiful introduction that discusses the whole life of the Rambam, how the Rambam wrote his Sefer, and a lot of very, very interesting information. And there are many Sfarim that came out regarding the Siyumim HaRambam, when they completed the Rambam. For example, this one came out in 1987 in Tafshim Mem Zayin, and over here you have beautiful pictures and pilpulim of Siyum Rambam all over the world, and you have letters from heads of state, Ronald Reagan, and from Uruguay, and from other countries, from Canada, where they all saluted the concept of finishing the Rambam. Here you have, for example, the 30th Siyum Rambam in Israel, which has pictures and pilpulim of the Siyum Rambams that took place in Israel. Then this one, only of recently, this one is another Sefer of Siyum Rambams in Israel, many Siyum Rambams that took place in different cities, and all the Rabbanim that spoke, etc. And then of course there's another beautiful Sefer on Siyum Rambam, which also came out in the late 80s, which has a lot of pilpulim from Rabbanim all over the world that they participated in Siyum Rambams. And this is really the greatest kavod that we can give to the Rambam. When we come to a Siyum Rambam, as a known thing in halacha called Beroiv Am Hadras Melech, the more people there are, the more we beautify the greatness of the Melech, of the king. And it's interesting that many of the commentaries of the Rambam are called with the word Melech, Mishneh LeMelech, etc. So they all Shar HaMelech, they use the word Melech in their Pirush on the Rambam. So therefore we encourage everyone to participate in a Siyum Rambam, and not only to participate in the Siyum Rambam once a year, but also to participate in the learning of the Rambam. And every single day learn something of the Rambam. If it's too hard to do 3 prakim a day, do 1 perik a day. If you can't do 1 perik a day, do the Sefer HaMitzvahs. You'll still be part of this Achdus Yisrael. And as mentioned before, we are now, any day before the Geula, we're going to be going out of Golus. We cannot rely on our neshama come down into another Golus, in another Gilgul, and therefore by learning the Rambam, we're going to know kol haTorah kula. So therefore, join in the ranks and enjoy your learning of the Rambam.